Genealogy is the history of an individual or family. And what we're doing when we're going out and getting genealogical research is we're developing information about families and individuals. That's kind of a different goal than history in general that tells nations, states, communities, all those kinds of histories. To some extent, genealogists over the years have actually written a lot of histories. There are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of what we call surname books. They can be descendancy books, meaning going back to a famous or original person, immigrant, or someone who was outstanding in the family and showing all their descendants. And then, or they can go the other way, showing someone's ancestry going back a certain number of generations. So basically what you have is a lot of different kinds of interests and a lot of different kinds of levels of people being involved. But generally speaking, we're all focusing on individuals and families. So the next probably important thing is that when we do this, the purpose of doing genealogy is to discover the family's history or the individual history through researching historical documents. And when we do that, then we're entering into the same activities that are common for all history types. Anybody who's involved in reading about, learning about, writing about, or teaching history has the same challenge. That is, we need to go back into what we call original source documents, documents that are made at a time of an event that occurred in somebody's life or during some time period that was important. And in the case of genealogy, this is an example of a United States Census record for 1920, and it happens to be from a little place in Arizona called St. Joseph, but it's now called Joseph City. It has a couple of my ancestors on here, my great-grandfather, some of my great-uncles, a few cousins, and that's all on this one sheet of the genealogy. So depending on the size of the community, or you may have one, may never see another relative on the same area, or you may see most of your family in the same exact spot. Understanding this, that how we get back to the information about our family are these historical documents. And so they become the method, the way that we develop a history and get accurate information. And part of the whole process, of course, is determining what is accurate, what is not accurate. Just because something's on an old document does not mean it's necessarily accurate. It could have been written about something even further in the past and not even be available. I ran into one of these recently when I was doing some research about a particular community, and I wanted to know who the first settlers were. And here was a very nice document. It was entitled "First Settlers of the Community" that I was researching. And it turned out it was by somebody who had never lived back in that time period, and in fact was more than 100 years separate from that. And it was like in recollections. No, she didn't have, the author did not have any recollections, but it was it turned out to be about 90%. If there was any historical fact in it, it was more of a novel, of a romance type novel. Okay, so we discover those documents about our ancestors, those records, by searching for them, any place they might be stored. And this becomes the day-to-day activity, if you will, the primary activity of doing genealogy. Today, we're greatly blessed, I would believe, to have a lot of these records digitized and online. Billions and billions and billions of records, but the number of records that are actually recorded online or digitized online is still a very, very, very small percentage of the total number of documents that are still sitting out there in paper. Today, if you're doing genealogy in a country like the United States, for example, you can probably find a substantial amount of information about most people, but going back to about 1850. If you lived in some other places in the world, you may not find any digital records at all. You may have to go to a actual library or repository, an archive, or some other physical location to find any records. There's still a big disparity out there between different countries, but even here within the United States, if you do enough genealogy over a period of time, you're basically going to run out of online resources. To go back and just summarize, finding and searching these documents is the main activity. Now, you may think that whatever else you're doing in genealogy takes time, but there's nothing at all that gets close to spending the time that it takes you to find the documents in the first place. You just can't do that. It's not instantaneous. Now, there's some things that have developed over the past few years that make this a lot easier. And one of those are online record hints or record matches or whatever that have been developed by the large online genealogical programs like Family Search and Ancestry and MyHeritage and Find My Past and a few others that have developed this technology. The accuracy of those varies, and it varies within the same program. Some of the things they find are very accurate, and some of them are not. You might get 5,000 returns, and maybe 2 of them are the correct person, or you might get the correct person with one name, with his name or her name, and have 200 people with exactly the same name and all be very closely look like they're the same person, and they're all from different places or different times or whatever. They're a help, they're an assistance, but they don't completely replace the process that we have of locating and reviewing and searching through the documents. So finding a source for the documents, for example, finding tax records or land and property records or probate records, that's the first challenge. And then within those documents, we may have to go to the point of looking page by page through the document in order to find the information we're looking for. Now, important to understand that the documents actually do have information about your family. It is pretty rare that people just simply do not show up in any documents at all in the United States. It's extremely rare. Even though you may think that statement is, oh, you're going to say, oh, I've been looking for my grandmother for 27 years, or I've been searching all the documents I can for many, many years. The answer is very simple. They may have simply changed their name, or they may have moved into a very unlikely and different place than the one that you're looking for, or any number of other kinds of circumstances. But that doesn't mean there aren't documents that have recorded those people. All you have to really do today to understand that situation about what goes on in today's world is to watch any one of the mystery or police type movies or television or on the internet type programs. And you'll see how many people get found rather quickly by simply computer searches or by looking at videos that are posted. If you want an interesting exercise in understanding the amount of information that's being gathered today, just go on the internet and look for your town and look for camcorders, cameras that are out there recording what's going on in your community. Now, if you live in a sizable community like Provo, you'd find that there's probably 200 or 300 and up to maybe 1,000 of those all over the city. And all you have to do to get recorded is basically to drive through or walk through the city. And you will be recorded dozens or hundreds of times. And that kind of information, you were saying, is that genealogically valuable information? Well, it's information that allows you to find people and find their activities. And if you project that in the past and you start to understand how many documents there were and how many records there were, Let me give you an example of a record that you may have never conceived of. One, a few years past, many years ago, I was working on getting the initial entry of the records into the Family Research Wiki. When there were a few thousand records, the original seeding of the wiki had about 8,000 records. Now they have over 100,000 entries, and there were about 8,000 when we started. And when I finished and basically began so involved in other activities that I was no longer trying to be involved directly in the wiki, there were probably around 50,000 articles. Now it's more than double that. And what happened back then is that I would say to everybody, well, what about farm organizations as records? They say, oh, where would you get farm organization records? What do you mean? I mean, like co-ops, farm co-ops. And they say, oh, really? I was able to find a single-spaced page, large 8.5 by 11 page, single-spaced list of farm organizations and in all parts of Utah, just that state, just this state of Utah. So historical documents, you have to understand that when you get past what we call marriage, birth, death, or MBD records or census records, that you get out into documents that could come from any particular place. The person may have been in some kind of professional organization. For instance, lots of professional organizations have licensing bureaus. All of these things have information and have supplied and kept this information. And so part of this kind of development of understanding how to do genealogical research involves being able to imagine that certain kind of record might exist and then finding it. And that is what we do and how we do it. So now what we have to do, we record the information in a family tree with a digital copy of the document, if possible. Now, this is really a crucial way of making an advancement. I have people coming to me for consultations every week, week after week after week, and many of them do not have a family tree. They are simply lost. They have no idea, in a sense, how they are interrelated or related to different people. And even if you are so private oriented that you don't want anything out there public about your family, you've got to realize a core issue. There is no privacy for people who are deceased. Dead people don't have privacy rights. So putting somebody's name and the information about an individual who died 100 years ago basically has nothing at all to do with privacy. Anyone who wants to can discover those people, just as you can. It's no different. Just because you find this individual does not mean that 100 or 1,000 of your other relatives could not have found or will find that same person in the future. Basically, there's nothing that's private about genealogy. Now we're not talking about living people. If it's living people have privacy issues. And we don't put information, generally speaking, on a public tree. But every one of the large websites is basically, if you mark someone living, they're not able to be seen by anyone except you. And so there shouldn't be any concern here. So we need to put that information up there, not just for your own benefit, by the way, because on a family tree like the Family Search family tree, you're almost instantly going to find that you have relatives. And if you do it on a huge family tree like MyHeritage, you may be overwhelmed with the number of people, relatives that they find for you in a very, very short period of time. This would happen to anyone who lives in a kind of a Western European structured society. In other places, it's maybe not so easy, but and some places nearly impossible. But in this society that we have going in Western Europe and the United States and throughout other countries like most of South America and other parts of the world. If you start a family tree on a program like MyHeritage, you're just going to be overwhelmed by the number of people that you're related to, because it's just phenomenally large. And you're giving that up when you create a private family tree. You're giving up the fact that somebody else may have done all this work before you even get to it. And you need to know, in order to save your time and your efforts, you need to plug it in a sense, into a place like the Family Search family tree that is shared family tree, where the information is not necessarily your tree, it's everyone's tree, and it's going into this universal family tree. And that gives you a better idea of what has been done. And of course, it's very frustrating for some, because the information doesn't agree with what you think or what you will be able to find. And you may have some differences with that. But that's, in a sense, a very small price to pay for the time and the effort that it saves from having to redo this. And I'm speaking from personal experience, because I had to start. I started, well, now over 40 years ago, long before there were computers, and I had to spend 15 years before I knew basically what my family, what the research had already been done on my family. And now all I would have had to done to get all that information that I gained after 15 years of work would be to go into the Family Search family tree and plug in my name, and maybe put in a couple of living people and connect me back to some dead relatives. So this is the important thing. This is why we're doing this. So now we need to know how to communicate within this world of genealogy. We need to be able to tell people what we've done, and in a way that they don't have to keep doing the same thing we do over and over and over again. So this is an effort, a combined effort on all the people involved in genealogy to say, look, we've done this, and it doesn't have to be done over. That doesn't mean that there aren't people out there who will just ignore all of the fact that all this work has been done and try and do it over again. But it is sort of a tragedy, because there is a very simple way to avoid having that kind of duplication of effort, not just duplication of people. You know, that's an issue within a particular program, that you've got more than one copy of the person there. That's also indicates that there's been a duplication of effort. But the duplication of effort that we're talking about is that somebody who completely ignores Family Search, or completely ignores Ancestry, Find My Past, MyHeritage, and all the other major programs that are out there, and just starts adding in names on their own, on their paper or whatever, and doing research and being frustrated. And what they find inevitably is that the major part of everything that they do and accomplish has already been recorded and is already known and is already sitting out there on one or all of these programs. Well, we do that is we record the place where we found the information, so that others can see where the information came from, and if they need to verify that information for themselves without having to spend the time to go research that particular point again. So if I put in a birth date, for example, into a website, I'm going to use Family Search from now on. Family Search, I put a birth date in there, and I don't put in where I got it or how I got it or where I calculated it. When I come to that, I have to do all the work over again. I have to go see if I can find this person and see if that birth date is correct, or if I even have the right person. So this is the essential part of keeping it all up. Now, to clarify the words here of genealogy, the original record is called a source. That means source meaning where you got the information, the source of that information. And the source is recorded with a citation. And the citation is the formal way that you enter that information and record that information, so that others are facilitated in finding and verifying, if necessary, the information that you've entered into your family tree. So most of the family tree programs have a standard way of recording information with a source citation. you record the source of your information, and you're recording. When you do this, your information lets others in the family know whether the information is accurate and reliable. I've said many times in the past that any entry in a family tree, any family tree, on any program, on paper or wherever, in a book or wherever it appears, any reference to an individual that doesn't tell me, historical individual, that doesn't tell me where that information came from so that I can go and verify that information, as far as I'm concerned, it's fantasy. It's imaginary. It's made up. Because I have nothing that ties me down to a real document, a place in history that I can actually see that this person lived and had the name and the dates and the places and the relationships are all verifiable.